It's just different.
Welcome back, everyone. It's 40 Ounce Hip Hop. Michael and Kyle here. Just excited to get back into our list. Obviously, we did our top 20 albums of the past decade. Had a fantastic time doing it. And I don't know, we felt like there was a little bit more we had to touch up on, So before the end of the year, we now present to you the 40 Ounce 3-pack, a 3-part Epilogue series episode for the top 20 countdown. And today we're starting off, well, it's the Epilogue series, right? So today we just have the Epilogue for the top 20. You excited, Kyle?
You already know, my G. So to me, I think without further ado, just for the one time, for the end of the year, please grab your shorties, grab your 40s, and come kick in and chill with your boys for this 40 Ounce Hip Hop.
No other way to do it.
Now, for the epilogues, I think the best thing to do to start off with is to talk about what feedback we've gotten from this, from our podcast, like what we kind of learned from doing such. So, for me personally, the feedback, I've gotten pretty positive feedback going forward, and I've had some pretty interesting discussions regarding the list from our listeners. Some warmer receptions than others. I've gotten some interesting requests I won't say requests, but just people tell me I probably should reconsider a few artists that should have been on the list. And I think one of the most requested, and we even touched upon this during our not prequel, but
the honorable mentions.
Our honorable mentions episode, that one of the artists that we left out was Drake.
Right.
And that was probably the person that I thought I've heard. Well, actually, second person I would probably say I was requested the most to be like, hey, why is he not on there? The first, ironically, was actually Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. That was the person that kept on getting asked. I was a surprised person. I was like, oh wow, I didn't think, I knew it was a great project. Great projects, whether you go Alfredo or Pinata. But it's like, people kept on like, yo, why isn't Gibbs on there? Why isn't Gibbs on there? He's one of the most consistent. I was like, and it kind of did make me think. It made me reflect on it made me reflect on a couple of other potential variations to the list that we talked about actually earlier on. But before we get into that, I want to know who else anyone requested from you, or any other points that were brought up by our listeners.
Quick question first. We mentioned Pinata in our honorable mentions episode, right?
We did.
Okay, and I know we mentioned Drake too. So
yes, but those are the two people that just kept on coming. Oh, so yeah, I heard you. They were listening to our mentions. I still think he should be on there. I'm like, okay, I get that.
Yeah, I think anytime you're gonna have a list like that, the question's always like, well, okay, what are you gonna take out?
Yes.
To replace it with. And I think, I don't know, maybe the top 15 or whatever, I don't think I ever heard anyone complain about any of the albums we had there. It was only you could have taken out one of the last 3 slots to put in this album or this album, like you said. As far as a specific artist, I think I remember when Corey was on the show to do the ex-military episode, I remember he was pretty critical of not having Telephone by No Name on there.
Yeah.
But honestly, some of the other complaints I heard too was the ordering of the list. Oh, you could have flipped these two, or you couldn't have had this one higher than that one. And that one, we had to explain to them, if Kyle and I had flipped whatever, Days Before Rodeo and Give You My Flowers Before I Can Smell Them. Like the list wouldn't be any different in that way. Like you could have flipped like the ones that are adjacent to each other in the countdown, like number 11 versus number 10 or anything like that. Like you and I tried our hardest to try to make it a good order, but
yeah,
a lot of them are interchangeable. You could almost think of them as like their tiers or something. So I think that was a complaint I heard a little bit, but it was like, you got to understand, like we put so many months into making the list, like so much of this is just interchangeable, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And and that's, it's funny talking about like the variations and like how we could have flipped things. Cause I was even, for this episode, I brought up the idea of looking at my original list and looking at our both individual original lists. And we've had a lot of our honorable mentions and a lot of albums that people think should have been on the list. We're on either one of our actual OG lists. We just kind of, but it is two people. It is like, we had to debate, we had to talk, we had to come to a concise, like, you know what, I can see that. Your argument, there's a good argument to be made there. I can support it. It's, your favorites probably were on this list, people. But when we put our two ideas together, it's kind of like it didn't fit, didn't really overlap. So it's not to discredit any of these projects that people, I think, liked, because, and I think I just want to make it clear, like you said, I feel like projects 20 through like 16, because I think it was originally 20 through 14 or 20 through 12 that we had, like me and you, because like we kind of swapped between.
Yeah, because yeah, it was the top 12, because we had agreed, like when I made my top 20 and when you made your top 20, we agreed on a pretty decent amount, like you said, 12 of them maybe. And so that ended up becoming the top 12. So that made things pretty easy. And so, yeah, then it was spots number 13 through 20 that was really difficult, because we had to find a mix of albums that you had versus albums that I had. You know, it wouldn't be fair if I put my list on there instead of your list to fill the rest out. And there were some projects that I was particularly passionate about, like I had in my top 10. So I was like, there's no way it can't be in our top 20. And same thing with you. I think for me, that was Give Me Flowers by Blue in Exile, where I was like, I had it at number 9 on my list. So I was thinking, okay, it has to be in our top 20. And for you, you had Run the Jewels 3. I think you had it like top 5 or something. So we're like,
I did. Yeah. I did have RTJ 3 in my top 5.
So we knew it had to make the list. So it was also about being fair about the projects that we were more passionate about personally. Because like I had Daytona at 17, and that ended up not making the list. And so I kind of remember us filling out the top 20 and me being like, okay, I can leave out Daytona because I have that at 17, but I have Give Me My Flowers at 9. I can't leave that out.
And it's kind of like how I felt with like Igor. Like I had because Igor was another project that I had a lot of people kind of like, oh well, you don't have no Tyler, no. I was like, or like Mac Miller, Swimming. Like, well, yeah, again, they're on honorable mentions, but we had to come to a list that we could both agree on, and, you know, and we would both support. And I honestly, I remember speaking to you about this, that what if we made a list with no repeats, like no repeating artists?
Yes.
Variation. So when I was thinking about this episode, I came to the conclusion, like to kind of give people a different perspective. If we were to take out artists with like any repeating spots, and that on our official list, so you had to take an album from Kanye, you had to take an album from Kendrick Lamar, you had to take an album from Death Grips, you had to take an album from
J. Cole, Kevin Abstract. That's 5 spots off rip. Yeah. If you don't even want to, that's 5 spots off rip.
So if you really wanted to, for anyone out there, you could replace five of those projects with those 5 spots. I'm not saying what order, I'm not saying how you want to do it, because some of the ones I think that could make that list, or if you want to, just from mock drafts of that I made, like swimming, Alfredo or Pinata, Igor, Take Care, telephone, or you could put instead of telephone, Victory Lap, or you could put in Daytona. There's a lot that you can kind of flow into those spots, but just to show you guys that it is a lot to think about with this list. There's a lot of great music out there. I think that is the main purpose of this project of a podcast, to just say, hey, there's so much out there, so many good artists and albums that you could really pull from. You could really put in this position depending on what you feel.
Yeah, it would have been way more inclusive that way. I also remember, because even just with the Saturation trilogy, I remember we were having a tough time of saying, like, what are we gonna value more? Inclusivity, or whatever the proper word for that is, inclusion, or just having what we genuinely believe to be the top 20. Because I even remember in your top 20, you're the one who came up with the idea to have Saturation trilogy as one thing, and whereas I had them all separated out. So it was like, man, I have 3 Kevin Abstract albums because I had 2 Saturations and I had American Boyfriend. I'm like, man, we have. And so then at that point, I'm like, okay, well then inclusion did start creeping into my mind. And it's like, oh man, now half of our list is taking up repeat artists between the 5 guys that you said. So I don't know. We definitely had to find a balance between inclusion versus
just
true top 20.
Yeah, our subjective, like, this is who we think is the best, because it's kind of hard when people have really good discographies. But oh no, we're not gonna count that.
Right.
But even when I said taking out Kendrick, it's like, dang, all right, so I'm taking out 2 Butterfly or Good Kid, Mad City. But
yeah,
it's like both classic albums.
Could you imagine trying to come up with a top 20 list but not including To Pimp a Butterfly because of a repeat album rule? That wouldn't have been fair to him at all.
It's kind of wild.
Well, so I guess just a refresher of what our top 20 was from 20 to 1. So in descending order, we got Man on the Moon 2, then Days Before Rodeo, then Give You My Flowers While I Can Still Smell Them by Blue in Exile, then Kids See Ghost, 2014 Forest Hill Drive, Taboo, Injury Reserve Self-Titled, Friday Night Lights, Run the Jewels 3, Triple X by Danny Brown, Ex-Military by Death Grips, Veteran by JPEG Mafia, The Waters by Mick Jenkins, Chance the Rapper's Coloring Book, Death Grips Money Store, To Pimp a Butterfly, the Saturation Trilogy, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and then Good Kid, Mad City. And so a question I have for you is, after, because we had so much time to marinate on the thought of what our top 20 was. So I doubt your opinion has really changed in the 4 months since we finished the podcast, and then in the, I don't know, 7 months since we originally formulated the final list. But do you think you would change anything about the list? Because I know how I feel.
I really just wouldn't. Well, I'm gonna say it's pretty much what I said with the artists I think could be on the list, because I almost am inclined to switch up the last 5,
but
that's hard. No, I would even, because like if I wanted to do, because certain artists, like, it feels kind of weird. The more I thought about it, the more I thought about influence and like actual products, but they're not. Because Take Care by Drake, it is weird to not have Drake in. You're talking about the 2010s.
For sure.
It's like you have Kendrick and Cole, don't have Drake. So I'm like, I feel like I probably would throw Take Care and Swimming somewhere. Like those albums I named, I feel like I would throw them into the list somewhere if I would take out the repeats. That's probably like the only thing I would do, because I really like the idea of having like, all right, so we'll take away some of the repeat albums. I'm not taking out Spring Butterfly. I'm sorry. You're not.
Yeah, so maybe
you're not prying that out.
So the lowest ranking repeats that we have are, well, it depends if you count Kids See Ghosts as Cudi or Kanye, right?
That's why I was taking that as both, because I wanted to keep Man on the Moon 2. So the way I would change it would probably take out. So I'll keep Man on the Moon 2. That's Cudi's individual project. Or if I want to have like go by higher rank, then I'm taking out Man on the Moon 2. Then I'm taking out 2014 Forest Hills Drive. Then American Boyfriend, Ex-Military.
Okay.
And so I'm taking out those projects and I'm throwing in albums like Take Care, Swimming.
Okay.
That's probably the only way I would change it, because I feel like, all right, you get more of an encompassing feel, like, all right, because these are great projects and great pivotal points for some people's careers, and kind of how it sounds of the 2020 and just styles. Because same thing I praised R2J for, like a rapper producer combination, is the same thing I had to praise Alfredo and Pinata with Freddie Gibbs and Madlib. It's like, so I kind of see how that could work. That's the only way I would change the list. But besides that, no, I'm not taking anything off. If I don't go in that direction, I'm not changing anything, because I like the list. I think it actually is a pretty fair representation of what this past decade was. Besides trap elements.
Right.
That's the only thing because I've gotten people suggesting Dirty Sprite 2, because they're like, yo, that was a banger of an album. Like, I understand that, but are you telling me Dirty Sprite 2 is beating anything past number 12?
Right.
Is Dirty Sprite 2 really better than 20? Even heck, is Dirty Sprite really better than 2014 Forest Hills Drive? It's totally different projects. It's a different vibe. I feel like that list would have to be its own thing. Like, best bangers of the 2010s. It has to be kind of like some genre.
Yeah, it's like comparing pitchers in baseball to position players, or I don't know, comparing a basketball player from the 1950s to someone playing right now. Like,
yeah,
it's hard to compare those more trappy albums to the 20 guys we have here.
Yeah,
I would say for me, I was very nervous about the order of the list, because I knew, so when we first made the list, I knew we wouldn't be satisfied with it, because we finalized it in early May, and we had been working on it for like months at that point. And so part of me knew, okay, Michael, you gotta end this list at some point, or else you're never going to be satisfied with it.
Right.
And then that fear got even worse when we did the honorable mentions episode, because I remember we talked about Daytona for 15 minutes or something crazy like that. And it's just funny, because I'm like, man, we damn near talked about Daytona as long as we would have talked about an album
that was on the list
that would have made the top 20. So the honorable mentions kind of had me freaking out, because we talked about all these projects that we loved, and I'm like, man, what if we didn't get the list right? But that fear for me completely went away once we started recording episodes, especially that first episode, because we talked about Man on the Moon 2 for like 35 minutes. Like, I'm pretty sure besides the top 4 with Good Kid, Mad City, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Saturation Trilogy, and To Pimp a Butterfly, because we talked about those for a very long time, each of those 4. I think besides the top 4, we probably talked about Man on the Moon 2 more than any other album. which
kind
is
of nuts that we went from like the first album we talk about to.
right.
I mean, I guess we set
So-
the standard.
Yeah, and so that kind of calmed me down a little bit, because when you talk about an album for 35 minutes, that really comforts you that like, okay, it probably deserved to be here if we love it that much. And same thing with Days Before Rodeo. We talked about that one for like 30 minutes also, and these are slots number 20 and 19. So if Daytona or whichever other honorable mentions we had, if they had made the list, they'd be replacing Man on the Moon 2 and Days Before Rodeo. And so the fact that we were able to go in such depth about how great they were, it made me realize like, okay, our top 20 is going to be good. It's one of those things where as long as you present your case for it and argue for why it's so great, you're not going to be upset with it being in the top 20.
Yeah, it is. That's the thing. Like, I'm happy with the list. And like, if I can see where people would want to change, and I kind of want to present, like I said, I want to present an alternative, and like, hey, this is a perspective. If you want to, you could do this. But if not, if I were to change it, this is how I change it. But if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
For sure.
And also, I think it's a pretty cool segue. This list as a whole has been a really cool segue for good conversations I've had about and kind of discovery of different people's music tastes from people that I have gotten feedback from about this.
What would
I
you
actually
say,
had some interesting takes.
yeah. What would you say the biggest differences were between the list, the top 20 that you personally came up with versus the finalized one? Because I'm looking at it right now on my notes here, and it's kind of funny. Like I have Friday Night Lights as high as number 4 on my list.
Jesus.
Which is kind of funny. Like maybe that's a bit higher than it should have been, but I had it at number 4 looking at it right now. Like I said, I had Give Me My Flowers all the way up at number 9, whereas in our list it was at 18. And the other big difference is in our top 20 we had Taboo by Denzel Curry and Injury Reserve self-titled, and I did not have those in my top 20, but I had 2 different projects from those same artists. I had Floss by Injury Reserve at number 19, and I have Imperial at number 20 by Denzel Curry. And so I think I'm happy that you convinced me to change it up in our top 20, because after going through a appreciation project like this, I've now changed my opinions on what my favorite projects are from those 2 artists respectively. And so I definitely think we got it right with the 2 other projects that we chose instead of those. But that's how my list, I would say those are the main differences between my list and the main list.
Well, for me, for like you kind of pointed out the RTJ 3. Like looking at my old list, it was number 5 on my list. And another big one, a couple, Telephone was number 10 on the list. Because for people who didn't, for our listeners, the way I came up with the list was actually based upon my personal list. I went through track by track what songs I found the best, and I found like were like either good like not good merit, like good sonically, well written. So overall, which songs that I liked at first, and out of the whole track list, I did a ratio, kind of like actually like I had every album that we talked about, whether honorable mentions or actually on the list, they were scored on like, all right, 7 tracks out of 7 tracks, 100%. Acid rap, 12 out of 14 or 11 out of 14, whatever. I would just go by that. And then I would get more critical each kind of run through of the list. And based upon that, I had Telephone at 90% like of a score, like going off all the categories I had at number 10. And Telephone didn't even make the list between us. So that was probably the biggest one, as well as Care For Me being at number 11 by Saba, because that's a personal project I really like. and for the bottom of the list was pretty different because I had, instead of Days Before Rodeo at number 19, actually I had 1999 and Anything at number 19. And then Days Before Rodeo was at 20. Well, 18 and 19, and then Days Before Rodeo was 20.
Gotcha.
So it was pretty interesting. Like, but I feel like with that list, I'm glad you convinced me to put Man on the Moon 2 at number 20 instead, because I had Man on the Moon 2 like floating in this weird limbo. Like, I was like, all right, well, do I like it more than 1999? Do I like it more than Days 4? Is it better? Is it worse? It was always in that range from 17 to 20, but I just couldn't find a place to put it.
Yeah.
But through our conversations, I was able to find a pinpoint. Like, all right, it needs to be here. There's nothing else I can really put like here before this. It's got to stay.
I fought very hard for Man on the Moon to stay in the top 20. That's for sure. The funny thing is with your just your original ranking list of, as far as like percentage of good tracks, is basically the measurement that you were making for these projects. Is I didn't even have Days Before Rodeo on my list of however many albums it was, 40, to re-listen to and seriously think about to put it out in the top 20. I didn't even have it in that list until I saw your list that had the ranking of best projects by percentage of good tracks, because I remember Days Before Rodeo had like a 90% or something like that, and that caught my attention because I'm like, man, I haven't listened to Days Before Rodeo since probably at least 4 years ago, and so, or 4 years ago at the time. And so I remember I re-listened to it. I was like, whoa, Kyle's onto something here. And then I remember throughout like the few months that we were making the list and finalizing the list, I probably listened to Days Before Rodeo more than any of the other projects in the top 20. Just because, I mean, for like some things like My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, that's been out for 10 years.
You've listened to it enough to know.
Yeah, I know about it. But Days Before Rodeo, it just caught my attention so quickly that I was like, okay, I need to be sure. This can't be just a gut reaction for me to suddenly want to include it in the top 20. But I ended up listening to it at least a couple times a week during the months that we were finalizing the list, because I just hadn't realized it. And I was like, man, something happened where it aged gracefully to where I definitely liked it when it came out, but for some reason it didn't stick to me like it does now.
Yeah, it's weird. That was the funny thing for me too with that project. I remember liking a couple tracks, like that 90% rating, which I know some people probably think is blasphemous, but it really came about over time. Like, the more I would revisit the project and just different times and settings, I would revisit the project. I'm like, you know what? This is pretty remarkable to hear, especially in comparison with, like, I'll listen to more Travis Scott because Travis Scott became a bigger artist in the mainstream stage. I was like, I would find myself instead of going to listen to some newer stuff, I'm like, I really want to listen to Days for some reason. So it was really funny to have that you had that late revelation as well, because I always liked it. I used to always play certain tracks, but as a project as a whole, it didn't sit. It had to sit and settle in for me as well over time. Because even with other albums I had considered on here, it's like, because even Imperial, I liked more tracks as time went on. Like, you made me, I forgot about tracks that I was like, oh dang, that's how it's going crazy on this. It's funny how our musical taste changes as we age.
Yeah, and on the contrary, the albums that I listened to the least during the months of finalizing the list, Definitely, like I said, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, and then Good Kid, Mad City also. Just because when you and I came up with our top 20s first, we both had them at 1 and 2. So at that point, it's like these are projects that I've listened to consistently since they came out 8 and 10 years ago.
Right.
There is no need to listen to it anymore. We were both so certain that we'd have it at 1 and 2.
It's kind of like I don't need to. The only thing that we need to re-listen really for was to solidify our choice for favorite tracks, I guess.
Yeah, once we started recording the episodes again, yeah.
And then what was our order? Like, because it was like only because I think we both had Good Kid, Mad City at 1, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was because I remember we were talking about To Pimp a Butterfly. Whether we were like, all right, is To Pimp a Butterfly in top 3 or is it top 4? Because it was kind of an odd episode. But, all right, so we ended with To Pimp a Butterfly. Come back, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, Good Kid, Mad City. It's like Kendrick, or
with Brockhampton sandwiched in there.
Yeah, just inspired by Kanye. Another project I didn't have to listen to very much was Run the Jewels 3. Because that's just a project. So I had that in my top 5. So I listen to that consistently.
Yeah. I mean, so many of these, they stayed in constant rotation for us since they came out, just because they were like instant classics to us. I'm trying to think, besides Days Before Rodeo, was there one that I had to listen to a lot? I'm going to say Injury Reserve Self-Titled.
Yeah. You had to listen to that a lot? Oh, because you did have Floss.
Yeah, because one, we had to compare it to Floss. And so I had to convince myself that it was better than Floss. Right. That was step 1. And then step 2 was that it had just came out. Because it came out in July of last year, maybe. And so by the time that we started making the list, it had only been out for a few months. So I would say that was probably the other one that I had to listen to a bunch. And so when you look at my Spotify Wrapped top 100 songs of the year playlist that they generate for you, there's a lot of Injury Reserve self-titled songs on there. A lot.
Yeah, I have Get the Fuck Up, 3-Man Weave, New Hawaii, and
Jailbreak the Tesla.
Yeah, that was actually my song last year.
That was my song last year too. Yeah.
And then I had Wax On, Wax Off still in my list.
Very nice.
Actually, my whole Spotify, my Apple Music rap list is actually really weird this year. Actually, quite strange. But yeah, man, I feel like the project like that for me was probably Give Me Flowers, because I remember you're like, oh, we need to have Give Me Flowers on there, and because I remember we were first on the list, we wrote Blue Next album, Little Heavens. We're like, wait, that was the wrong decade.
Right.
Around that, so yeah, the list of Give Me Flowers, and I just haven't listened to it in a while. I remember listening to it a lot, but then I kind of just fell back from it. So when we came with the list, I was like, oh yeah, I haven't heard this in years. Like consistent, like the whole project in full. I listened to certain songs, but like I didn't just run through the project anymore. But once I did, I was like, oh man, yeah, it deserves it. It deserves its flowers.
Yeah, it's one of those albums that I wouldn't really add individual songs from to a playlist that you'd keep on shuffle. Like, basically every other album. There are times where I don't listen to them in full, where I just listen to songs that I have in a playlist from them. But yeah. Give Me Flowers is one of those albums that you have to listen to from start to finish.
Yeah, for the best experience.
Well, is there anything else about the finalized top 20 that you've come to appreciate or has grabbed your attention in the 4 months since we finished the list?
I've come to appreciate I've always liked the diversity in hip hop, but I've come to appreciate it even more so, like the different sounds, because it made me kind of going through the list and making the list and having to go comb through my musical catalog and comb through other people's suggestions and even artists. I'm like, you know what? I've heard a lot about this person, but I just never. I've had this person. I listened to them once, but I didn't listen to them again. It made me kind of refresh my perspective on, like, man, there's a lot of great artists out there, and a lot of great music to kind of comb through.
Yeah.
And it was really nice to kind of remind myself, like, you know what? I gotta take more chances with some of these people, like some of these artists.
Yeah, hip hop in the 2010s was just
Stacked.
it's just such a cool decade for us to live through as like we said, like our first full decade of truly being able to be a hip hop fan from 2010 to 2020. Because like you said, just the scale of, because of the internet, just how many artists were out and accessible, the amount of different sounds. It's just so crazy, because I can remember like us being in school at the beginning of the decade and like talk of, like, you go on internet forums and the talks all like about how bad rap is now, you know, like we used to go watch YouTube videos that'd be like Lil Wayne sucks, Eminem's the GOAT. I don't know, you know what I mean? Like there was just so much talk about like the same rappers from the 2000s and not the new guys, and about how rap stinks now. And now it's just funny looking back in 2020 here and just being like, man, like little did we know, like there was just so much ahead.
Yeah, people used to bully Drake. He's like, singer rappers, how dare they? And now he's Drake.
We had to push out that 2000s crowd, and it took the 2010 crowd to really take over, to push out those guys. But it took some time, but that's where we're at now.
Yeah, man. I think it was a hell of a decade, and 2020 has been a hell of a year.
Yeah, I'm just gonna leave that about that at 2020. But, all right, I think this is a good start to the 40-ounce 3-pack.
Yeah, man. It's like, hopefully everyone stays tuned for the next 2 piece. Said, see y'all for the next time, and make it home safely.